Today is the day we get the opportunity to talk to new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, plus a former NFL GM tells us what an NFL offseason is like, free agency, the draft, and a whole lot more. Comes up on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for February 16th, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you. The show is growing each and every day, and that's because of you, Raider Nation, so we cannot thank you enough. Also got a big shout out to my man Ari, who, well, without him, the show's not on YouTube at all. So shout out to my man Ari. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3 of today's show. Get as much feedback in as possible as we close out the week really strong. Looking forward to that. Segment number 2, look forward to you hearing this conversation. I actually had an opportunity on my other radio show on ESPN Radio Game Night to catch up with former Raider GM Dave Ziegler. And I'm a big Dave Ziegler guy. I like to consider him a friend. He's a guy that I've communicated with quite a bit throughout the time, even while he was the GM. And while he's not the GM, again, like I said, I consider him a friend. He just was able to join the show and talk about an NFL offseason. What goes through a GM's mind as they're preparing for free agency, as they're preparing for the combine, as they're preparing for the draft. Lots of good nuggets from Dave Ziegler, who, again, I think is a very sharp NFL mind, a guy that I believe was collateral damage. He was kind of guilty by association with Josh McDaniels. You'll hear that conversation coming up in segment number 2 from my ESPN radio show Game Night, again, weekly on ESPN Radio. Here in segment number 1, I like to give you the news and notes of the day, so we'll go ahead and jump right into it. And off top, we get an opportunity today, this afternoon, as a matter of fact, to talk to new Raiders offensive coordinator Luke Getsy. He'll meet with the media by way of Zoom, so we won't be at the Intermountain Health Performance Center. I don't even know if he's in Vegas yet. I don't know if he's been able to kind of make the transition and get to town, but get the first opportunity to talk to Getsy. And I got 3 things that I want to make sure I come away with this conversation knowing a little bit more. One, I think the most important thing is the offensive philosophy. Now, he's not going to tell us everything, but I think it's a fair question, right? Okay, so what is the mentality? What is your thoughts? What is the process that you're going to be going through as you're trying to put this Raiders offense together? Again, this was one of the biggest questions that I had, not even when the season ended, more like halfway through the season. How are you going to fix this offense? How is this offense going to be better than what it was in 2023, where the team struggled to score 20 points? So the next offensive coordinator has to have a plan. What is that plan? Again, they're not going to tell us everything, but to ask the offensive philosophy, what does he believe in? All we know is what he did while he was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, and others. He wasn't the offensive coordinator. And then when he was the offensive coordinator, was in Chicago for 2 seasons, and it wasn't great, right? So, okay, so what is a Luke Getsy offense? What is that? What does he vision that looking like, especially alongside of Antonio Pierce? So that's the first thing that I want to ask him, want to make sure that that's asked before the meeting's over. Also, number 2, what did you learn from your experience in Chicago as a first-time play caller? You always want to continue to get better. You always want to continue to grow. As Courtney Cronin and many others that cover the Chicago Bears say, Luke Getsy, especially his first year as the offensive play caller, wasn't very good. But I get it, right? I mean, we just saw Bo Hardegree get thrown into that same position mid-season, right? When Antonio Pierce took over as the interim coach, but Bo Hardegree took over as the interim offensive play caller, offensive coordinator. And it wasn't easy for him. He had moments where it was good and other moments where it wasn't good. So, Luke Getsy, he's going to have to, say and show what he learned and how he's going to improve from his struggles that he may have had in Chicago, so he doesn't have those issues here in Vegas with the Raiders. So that's the second thing that I want to ask Getsy when we meet with him this afternoon by way of Zoom. And the third one, what attracted you to this job with Antonio Pierce and the Raiders? He had other opportunities, right? He had the Saints that were talking to him. I believe the Patriots talked to him. He had a few interviews that were lined up, probably 4 or 5 lined up, and I think he was a finalist for the Saints job, and obviously he ended up getting the Raiders job after they tried to get Cliff Kingsbury to be the offensive coordinator. So he wasn't option A, but apparently he was in the running the whole time. He was a finalist. He just wasn't the number one finalist, which was Cliff Kingsbury. But as soon as the thing with Kingsbury went down and you knew that wasn't going to be a signing, they turned their attention immediately to Luke Getsy. But what was it about this job? What was it about the Raiders? What was it about Antonio Pierce or the weapons that are on that offense that attracted him to the team? So those are the three things that I want to make sure to ask Luke Getsy when we meet with him about 12:10 Pacific time by way of Zoom. Offensive philosophy. What did you learn from your experience in Chicago as a first-time play caller, and what attracted you to the job with Antonio Pierce and the Raiders? Another thing that I wanted to bring to the table, a little nugget that I wanted to bring to the table here in the Locked On Raiders podcast, segment number 1, little news and notes. Ran across this podcast from Brett Boone, the Brett Boone podcast, and Rob Ryan was a guest on it. Rob Ryan I just ran into on Radio Row at Super Bowl 58 at Mandalay Bay Convention Center, and I was going to talk to him. Actually, he goes to the same barber I do, Indicut Barbershop in Henderson. We go there, and obviously I go there a lot more than he does, but I didn't get a chance to talk to him the morning tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920. They actually had the chance to interview him. I was in the middle of another interview when he came and sat down at the table, or else I would have got that opportunity. But he was on the Brett Boone podcast talking about a lot of things, and this is probably about a week ago, but I came across it on Thursday, and I just thought that this little quick answer from him was pretty cool. He was asked about head coaches, and he brings up Antonio Pierce and what exactly he's bringing to the Raiders and how he likes it. So check it out. Here's Rob Ryan from the Brett Boone podcast.
Like when you're saying head coach, I mean, I was fortunate enough. I worked for Bill Belichick. I worked for my father, two completely different people. I worked with Sean Payton. I worked for Al Davis. I don't know who the head coach was, but Al Davis was. So those guys set the tone. They set the tone and this AP's a superstar, believe me. And I love the job he's done here with the Raiders because I'm a Raider at heart. I'm going to always be one.
So I thought that was pretty cool, right? Rob Ryan saying that he's through and through a Raider, right? And he loves what AP's bringing to the table. And, you go back to the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark and Channing Crowder and Fred Taylor and what AP was saying. And I'll tell you, man, I've said it before and I'll say it again that I have so much confidence that this team is heading in the right direction that AP gets it. I just feel like, and I said this on my radio show on Thursday, this is my Madden. And I'm not saying he's going to be a great coach like John Madden, but the energy and the juice that John Madden brought to the Raiders, well, for me, in my era, that's what AP brings, right? This is the one coach that I feel like, okay, he gets it. He understands what the Raiders are all about, and he knows how to get the most out of them. Like, I'm so excited about what AP is going to be able to do with this team, what my anticipation level is. Like, I can't wait until the season gets started, and obviously we're only in February, so it's a long way to go. But, man, this process, I believe, is going to be fun because I think AP is going to have an opportunity to really show what he could bring to the table. And you can hear the excitement even in Rob Ryan's voice right there. The final thing I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast is we talked a lot about the quarterback position. We got a lot of feedback on the quarterbacks. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 3. Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus. He's a guest on my radio show quite a bit. He was a guest on Thursday on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness, and I asked him a question about the top 3 quarterbacks. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. Doesn't matter what order you put them in. Those are the top 3 quarterbacks. There's no doubt about it. So I asked him a question about those 3 quarterbacks and really what it would take for the Raiders to move up from 13 to number 2 or 3 to have an opportunity of getting Jaden Daniels. We know who the big 3 are, regardless of whatever order you put it in. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. It's just the order that comes out of my head. Do you see that as being the top 3, and do you see an opportunity where maybe after the combine, Jaden Daniels is like solidified in as that number 2 guy?
Yeah, I think that is the clear-cut top 3. You're going to start to see, and you already kind of have seen some, rumblings about J.J. McCarthy and some teams' boards being higher than 4, which I think is insane. I think he should be QB4. I think McCarthy is ahead of your Bo Nixes, your Michael Penix, etc. But I think it's kind of crazy if he's ahead of those 3 names. I do think you are going to see, and I've heard personally more and more, that there are a handful of teams that have Jaden Daniels as the number 2 quarterback. I mean, he's just the dynamic athletic ability, good thrower outside the numbers on deep balls all year long. And, of course, a great runner, a great first step to kind of bail from the pocket and avoid contact. Yeah, there are going to be teams that have him as QB2. It probably comes down to, just the preference of, the Washington Commanders. But I think that those 2 are pretty interchangeable. I do think Caleb Williams is a near consensus QB1, probably not every building, but I think most probably have him as the top guy.
A lot of folks in Raider Nation, including myself, talk about Jaden Daniels as the quarterback for the Raiders only because of the relationship with AP and the fact that he was in the locker room following the game week 18. You just kind of get that sense that he would love to play for that coach because he's so comfortable with them. The Raiders are at number 13, as you know. What would it take to get from 13 to, say, 2 or 3 to have an opportunity to get Jaden?
Yeah, the connection there is awesome. And you know, it's pretty rare and pretty special for something like that to happen. So, I mean, look, Trey Lance's trade was from 12 to 3, so it's kind of the blueprint. And that was, 2 extra first-round picks and a third-round pick. And then I think there was some, exchanging of like 5th and 6th. But, see, you're talking this year's first, 2 more firsts, and another day 2 pick involved as well. Maybe to go from, to 2 would cost even more than that. Maybe you have to throw in a player at that point. But, yeah, you're talking about as big of a trade package as you can have.
So there you go. That's Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus talking about what it would take to move up from 13 to 3, 13 to 2. Basically, it'd be like the Trey Lance trade as the 49ers move up from number 12 to number 3 with Miami to go ahead and get the number 3 overall pick and have the opportunity to get Trey Lance. Obviously, that didn't work out. If you don't remember exactly what that trade was, the 49ers gave up the 2021 first-round pick, number 12 overall, 2022 first-round pick, which ended up being number 29 overall, 2022 third-round pick, number 101 overall, 2023 first-round pick, number 29 overall, and a little bit extra on it. So that's what it was from 12 to 3. Obviously, with this draft class, it's going to be a little bit more than that. So if you're willing to give that up, which I do believe the Raiders will be willing to do if their guy is there that they want, if they have a guy that they're targeting, if they're comfortable with that, I do think that they'll make that move. Again, they've got to be 100% sold, though, because that's a lot to give up to be like 90% or 85%. You've got to be 100, matter of fact, maybe 110% sold on the guy that you're going to get if you're willing to make that kind of move. The 49ers did it. It didn't work out, and they got very, very lucky that Brock Purdy came in as Mr. Irrelevant and saved the day. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, you'll hear the conversation that myself and Gabe Neitzel had on my ESPN radio show Game Night, talking with Dave Ziegler, former Raiders GM, talking all things off-season. You'll hear that conversation coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about DoorDash. And DoorDash is an app that you need to have on your phone. Right? If you're hungry, if you need groceries, if you need any kind of supplies that DoorDash will offer, they offer plenty of different items, and especially in the local area, DoorDash is what you need. Restaurants, groceries, flowers, gifts, whatever the case may be, it's an all-in-one app for your everyday needs, and it is something that is so super convenient. The wife does it all the time because I don't really do it, but I do have it. I do have the capabilities, but I let the expert do it. So next time you're running low on dinner ideas, pet supplies, or maybe even just time, you can get so much more than you realize delivered directly to your door. Or maybe you're at the job, it can come directly to your job as well. If you didn't have a chance to hit the grocery store last weekend and all the games were going on and you didn't want to miss anything, boom, DoorDash is the way to go. So whatever watch party or any kind of party you got coming up, get it delivered with DoorDash. Football season's over, but we're in the thick of basketball games, the school year, and let's face it, just plain winter. I think a million reasons daily to use DoorDash. Hop on the app and make your day a little bit easier. Get dinner for tonight, groceries for the week, and a consolation prize for your sad friends in San Francisco who are still upset that the 49ers lost Super Bowl 58. All could be done with DoorDash. DoorDash, your door to more. Head to the DoorDash app to get everything you need delivered. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. I had an opportunity to catch up with Dave Ziegler, former Raiders GM, on Thursday on my radio show, ESPN Radio Game Night. I was on with Gabe Neitzel, who does radio up in Milwaukee. He's a really good dude. Fun show, and me and Dave have been texting back and forth quite a bit, and I kept telling him that, hey, man, I want to get you on the show to talk about the offseason, and matter of fact, really have him on multiple times throughout the course of the offseason through different phases, right? And, of course, right now, GMs, scouts, everyone, they're trying to get ready for free agency. They're trying to get ready for the Combine that's coming up in a couple weeks. I'll be in Indianapolis for that. I'm looking forward to that, as the Raiders offseason is never, ever boring. So he was a guest on my radio show on Thursday, and I thought that was really cool, and he's going to do this more often than not. But we started off the conversation talking about, while he was the Raiders GM, did he ever feel the need to try to build a team that can compete with the guys that just won the Super Bowl 58 in the Kansas City Chiefs? Here it is.
Yeah, no question. I think, you're always looking at the teams in your division that you need to beat and how you need to beat them, because ultimately that's your That's your clear path to the playoffs, is winning your division. And so, understanding what we needed to do to try to beat the Chiefs, improve the pass rush, draft a Tyree Wilson, for example. Those are some of the moves and some of the thoughts that go into taking players when you're looking at who you have to get over the hump with. And a good pass rush is one of those deals when you're playing the Chiefs you better have.
So now we're in this period where you have a couple of weeks before the combine here at the end of the month, obviously the draft in April. What's the most important thing? What are the things NFL executives are thinking about going into this period of the year?
Yeah, I think the one thing that each executive is doing and organizationally is you're looking at, what your own team needs are. And then I think when you're looking at those team needs, you kind of have to create a hierarchy. And, we always talked about what were our musts and what were our wants. And, when we looked at our team, there was maybe 3 or 4 things that we must accomplish during the free agency period. And then you have your group of things that you want to accomplish. And those might be more luxury items. So every team's taking an inventory of what their needs are, and then strategically looking at what's available in free agency and what does the draft board look like this time of year, and where maybe is there a surplus in the draft that is thin in free agency that you can kind of, you can play off of, or vice versa. The free agency is really robust and the draft is going to be thin. And so, you're looking at those types of things. You're starting to prepare for the combine. You're having some February draft meetings this time of year where your scouts are coming in and kind of identifying what are the things that you're going to need answered for the players that are at the combine. You have all these interviews that are going to go down at the combine, and you're starting to figure out where are some of the loose ends at, what are some of the strategic angles we need to take to maybe get some of the questions that we have from our fall process on a prospect, whether it's durability issues, whether it's a football intelligence, whether it's character and maturity. And you're starting to get all those things, those ideas formulated. So when you go to the combine and you have these interviews, you have a strategic plan of what you need to accomplish with the time you have with these guys at the combine.
Former NFL GM Dave Ziegler is with us here on Game Night on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Free agency is one of those tools where you can help fill some holes on your team. But one thing you always did that I really respected was you stayed disciplined. You didn't overspend. How tough is that not to overspend and kind of get into a bidding war when there's one big high-ticket free agent out there that you may want?
It's tough. And I think that, free agency is I've always looked at free agency as a little bit of fool's gold, meaning, I always wanted our scouts to know, why are these guys free agents? How did they get here? Is it because of something we don't know? Is it an injury thing? Is it, is it a character thing? Is it, or maybe it's just they're looking to get paid, but I always wanted to know the why. And I think, when I say fool's gold is you're probably overspending. And I think that you have to understand that when you go into free agency. And so you have to set a price point. And I think it's setting that price point and being disciplined with that price point is a tough thing to do, but it's very important to do in order to allocate your resources the right way and be able to sign the number of players that you need to sign to improve your roster. And I think you're gonna overspend in some spots, and you better be comfortable with who that player is, what they're bringing to your team, not just on the field, but from a leadership perspective and from a work ethic perspective. You want your highest paid players to be your best workers and your best leaders. That creates harmony in the locker room, and when you're able to achieve that, you can get on the right path of building something that's going to be successful in the NFL.
Dave, can you walk me through what a draft board, might look like? Just because so many times I've heard general managers step up to the podium during draft season and say, hey, we're taking the best player available. And yet it seems, all the time like a team that has a pass rusher need. Oh, suddenly the best player available on their board. Oh, that's where he ends up going for, as a draft pick.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's the best available player at the position of need, and that's not, you don't say that necessarily, but that's ultimately there's the human behavior element. That's oftentimes what it is. You start to lean towards who those best available players are, but your hierarchy of how they're going to fit to your team is what your needs are often. And so the draft board, at this time of year it's preliminary, but I would say when you go in and you start to finalize that draft board, like we were picking at 7 last year, we had a group of about 9 players that we felt were worthy of, call it, being picked in the top 7. And as you go down your draft board, that's how it ends up forming up. You end up, you might have picked 53, and you start to get there, and you're looking at who those 5 players that you're going to be comfortable picking are there, and you hope those 5 are available. And to your point, it's the best available, but it's often the best available at a position of need, and that's kind of how you ultimately end up going through most of the draft.
Dave Ziegler, former NFL GM, is with us here on Game Night on ESPN Radio with Gabe Neitzel. I'm Q Myers. So, of course, the conversation is always going to be surrounding the quarterbacks. This year it looks like a good group of QBs, probably 4 or 5 of them that can go probably in the top 10 to top 15. How do you kind of navigate through the waters and even decide, hey, I'm going to try to take this pick and trade up to go get that quarterback that I may need? What's the kind of pros and cons to that approach?
Yeah. Well, I think the pros and cons, here's what I would say, first of all. If you feel convicted on a quarterback and you think that's going to be your franchise player, I don't really, and I'm going to exaggerate here a little bit, but I don't know if there's an asking price that is too high, because ultimately that's such an important position. And if you feel you're getting, the Josh Allen or the Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson or, whoever that is, I don't know if there's a price tag that's too steep. But obviously you have to understand where your team is too. And if you're a team that needs those draft picks to build your roster and you need more of a foundation, then you have to be diligent in how much you're willing to give up. Just like we were talking about in free agency, you set your price point on a player and you got to be disciplined to not go over that. You have to do the same thing when you're looking up, talking about trading up. And what that cost is and how that would hurt your team if you maybe gave up too many assets. But that's how I think you go into that. And I would just add, I think the quarterback position too, when you look at it, the one thing that the fans have to understand and executives, we all have to understand it too. You have to be careful when you evaluate the quarterbacks. I think you have to do it historically. I think if you just always evaluate the quarterbacks up against who's in that specific draft class, you can grade a guy too high depending on what the quality of those other players are. So we always talked about when you're looking at a Drake May, let's go back and compare him and watch Justin Herbert, watch Josh Allen, watch Stroud, watch Bryce Young again, and let's compare him to those players too to make sure we're getting a true evaluation on the quarterback to understand what his value actually is.
Is that also part of the reason why quarterback is so hard to evaluate? Because I feel like, we've been playing football for over 100 years professionally, Dave, and yet that still seems to be an incredibly tough position to figure out come draft time.
Yeah, it is. And one of the main reasons for that is it's one of the few positions where so much of the evaluation goes beyond the tape. And it goes into the classroom. It goes into their ability to think, their ability to learn, their ability to problem solve, their ability to process information. And you can get some of those things on tape, but you really have to dig into the interview portion of that to understand what that is, especially because the offenses between college football and the NFL are so different. And then you have to understand the drive and the mental toughness of those individuals, because it is such a high-pressured, polarizing position in the NFL. There is so much pressure. There's so much to learn. And I think you have to have the right mindset to be able to handle all of that. And I think that's why it's such a hard position to evaluate, because it goes beyond the tape. And those other areas that I just talked about are so critical to a player's success that that you need to get those right. And I would say this, there's a lot of people in the league that don't always understand how to evaluate those qualities that I just said. You have to have someone in the building that understands what it takes and what those measurements need to be successful. And that's what makes it so tough.
We'll close out with this, Dave. And again, Dave Ziegler, former NFL GM, is with us here on Game Night. Since the Combine is the next thing to come up right at the end of the month, How much do you take away from the combine with what you see, especially from the players on the field, as opposed to like the game film that you saw from them throughout the course of the college season?
Yeah, for me, and maybe everybody's a little bit different, the stuff that goes on the field at the combine it's a small piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
It doesn't have a tremendous impact because it's not football, it's not tape. But it does confirm some of the things you may see. You're going to confirm what a player's speed is. You're going to you're going to be able to understand what their agility is. And so some of those numbers maybe will confirm what you saw on tape. Some of those numbers are going to make you go back and watch the tape. You might have watched a guy during the season and felt like his play speed wasn't very good, and then he runs a 4.34, and it's like, well, let me go back and make sure that I saw those things correctly. So I think it's more of a checks and balances rather than having really a huge impact on the evaluation and call it the grade of the player.
I'll tell you what, it's a fun time of year. It's the offseason. Every team feels like they have a chance. And like I said, the combine's coming up, free agency, and the draft. Well, Dave, fantastic stuff. We definitely appreciate you. Hopefully we are able to do this more often throughout the course of the offseason leading up to the draft. We'd love to pick your brain some more. We appreciate you.
I would love to do it again. I appreciate you guys. You guys do a great job. Love listening to the show. Q, I shoot you the text when I'm working at night, watching some film that I'm dialed in. So, congrats to you guys. Keep it up, and we'll talk down the road.
So there was a conversation with former GM Dave Ziegler. Obviously, he was the Raiders GM, but just thought it was cool to hear from him just kind of what goes into the thoughts and the process of an offseason. And I love what he said about the quarterback position. Yeah, you can look at the quarterbacks and you can compare them to the quarterbacks that are in the current draft. Like we're looking at the top three. We're looking at, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. How do they compare historically to the quarterbacks drafted in their slot, right? I mean, I thought that was a really good point that I don't think a lot of people bring up and think about. I know I hadn't thought about that, but that's why we have a guy that was in that position on the show. And that's why to hear from him. Again, I think that he's a very smart, sharp, football mind. I think he's a guy that became collateral damage and was guilty by association because he was there alongside Josh McDaniels. But I think that Dave Ziegler did some really good things. And you can look up and down the Raiders roster right now and think about the guys that competed and the guys that really contributed in 2023. A lot of those guys are guys that Dave Ziegler brought in. Did he do everything perfectly? Nah, of course not. I'm sure he'll be the first to tell you that. But he did do a lot of good things and brought in a lot of players that really helped contribute, and even coaches. Remember, Antonio Pierce is the head coach because Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels hired Antonio Pierce, so he was already there on the staff. So that's something to think about as well. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about Nissan. And are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. How about the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder? Has room up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. How about the Armada, the 2024 Nissan Armada? It'll change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a call from Jay Peasy from the 209, calling to talk about the quarterback position and how he thinks the Raiders should approach it, and it's not selling the farm. Here he is, Jay Peasy from the 209.
Yo, what's up, Q? It's your boy Jay Peasy from the 209. Just wanted to tap in, say what's up. I just wanted to drop my quick 2 cents on the whole quarterback situation. Honestly, starting to think, I don't know if it's going to be a good idea to sell a farm for Jaden Daniels. To be honest, I don't think they're even going to do it. I think they should maybe move up a few spots if they do want a quarterback. If not, try to get somehow, one of these like lower, not lower, but like a JJ McCarthy or a, Bo Nix, kind of worried about, Penix, but, yeah. And, Anyways, you know what? I had just random thought. Whatever happened to T3 Facts, man? Like, that dude was dope. I used to love his little quick hits and stuff like that. Like, man, we need to bring that guy on. Maybe for a segment to drop some knowledge, drop some quick facts or something. Nah, all right, Q. Peace out.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thought, right? Is it worth selling the farm? That's a decision you got to make. Just like Dave Ziegler said in segment number 2, like, you go all in. There's not really a price that's too much to pay if you fully believe in that guy. If you're 100% sold on that guy, it's not too much, right? But if you're not sold, then you've got to think twice. And maybe you do just let the board fall to you, and then you go and get the guy that's there if you're comfortable with him. Just like the Raiders waited till 4th round to get Aiden O'Connell a year ago. Maybe they wait till number 13 to get a Bo Nix. Maybe they wait till number 13 to get a Jay McCarthy. Maybe they wait to get a Michael Penix. I mean, who knows? Or maybe they see a guy that they want, they target, and they go get him. As far as our guy T3, haven't heard from him in a minute, right? I know he's got his own show that he was working on. I'm sure he's going to be dropping his 5 quick hits somewhere. But, you know, it's always good to hear from him when we do hear from him. Just haven't heard from him in a minute. But, yeah, shout out to T3 Raider Facts, OG here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Jay Peasy, thanks so much for the call. It's always good to hear from you as well, my man. Up next, a text from Raider Dan in Rochester. Q, with all this talk of who the Raiders will draft at quarterback and what it will cost, can you take a deeper dive into some of the day 2 or day 3 quarterbacks that have the potential to be franchise quarterbacks? Nobody's talking about Jordan Travis and how he's doing in rehab. I think based on the 2024 season, he'd be a great quarterback to develop. Since there is not much at offensive tackle on free agency, I'd rather see us build the trenches and take a pair of quarterbacks like Michael Penix and then double dip with Travis. We could also take another weapon for the offense like one of the speed wide receivers or pair our tight ends with Bowers and be multidimensional. We could afford to be patient and see what we have with Akon and build around him. That's Raider Dan in Rochester. Thanks for the text. Definitely appreciate you. And yeah, I've talked about Jordan Travis quite a bit. I think that he's going to be a guy that you're going to learn a lot about at the combine, especially with the medical, see how the rehab is going. He was dynamic at Florida State until he got that lower leg injury and then ended his season. Yeah, I'll definitely do some deep diving. We'll talk about all the quarterbacks. I'm not going to just stop at, Jaden Daniels and Drake May and Caleb Williams and Michael Penix and Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy. Like, there's plenty of quarterbacks in the draft, and that's such a big area of conversation when it comes to the Raiders. We'll definitely do that. We'll do plenty of deep dives in that. I know on my radio show later on today, I'm going to be doing a deep dive with Billy Embody, who covers LSU. So he's going to be talking with me about Jaden Daniels. But next week, Daniel Jeremiah is doing a pre-combine conference call. And I love those conference calls. That's next Thursday. So we'll talk a lot about the quarterbacks. He'll rank the quarterbacks and all that good stuff. I mean, we're in the thick of things now. It is full throttle draft season. So, yeah, we'll do deep dives on all these different quarterbacks. We'll look at the trenches. We'll look at wide receivers. We'll look at defensive tackles, all that. It is go time, and we're going to go. That's what we will do. Raider Dan, thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Jacob at Hanford, repping the 559. He's calling to talk about the quarterback position and how people are assuming what teams' big boards look like for the top 3 quarterbacks. Here he is, Jacob at Hanford.
What's up, Q? This is Jacob from Hanford. Got a few things to say, and they might contradict, but I'll try to keep it clear. I think everybody is looking at the quarterback situation. Obviously, that's the number one thing on our mind. We're looking at the draft, the top 3 picks, and I think that the assumption that everybody has is this Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. We're assuming that everybody's board looks like that. Everybody's board looks like Caleb first, Drake second, and then Jaden third. Now, there's 2 things about that. One is bad, and the other would be not so bad. I've heard a couple insiders say that the quarterback from J.J. McCarthy, that he's pretty high on a lot of people's board, that a lot of people have him at 2 right next to Caleb. I don't know how much credence I really give that, because it is lying season. Obviously, they want to put out bad information so that people don't know what they're going after. But if that were true, that would give us a much better chance of landing a guy like Jaden Daniels. But here's the thing, and this may be because I'm a Raiders fan and I really want a mobile quarterback, but when I look at the quarterback situation and I see Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, out of those 3 guys, the one that I would want the least is Drake May. So I don't know why we're so quick to assume that Drake May is number 2. Who knows? Maybe he even drops to the 3rd or 4th quarterback that's taken in the first round. Who knows? I don't know. That's really all I got to say about that. But ultimately, here's what I will say. If Jaden Daniels does make it past 2 and New England is willing to move out, I think that that's going to be the Raiders. The Raiders are going to be all over that. I think that there's no way Antonio Pierce isn't going to go up and get his guy. We're probably going to sell the house for him. That's just the way I'm looking at it. If he goes past the Patriots and they don't trade out of it and they pick somebody else, then I don't see any chance that we don't go up and get him. I think AP is pretty much sold out on getting his guy. Anyway, let me know what you think, Q. Appreciate everything you do. Take it easy. Raiders.
Thank you for the call. I appreciate you. And yeah, off top, I do believe that those are the 3 top quarterbacks, just like I was talking with Brad Spielberger, and you heard that in segment number 1 from Pro Football Focus. And it doesn't really matter what order you put them in. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams. Like, it doesn't really matter. I think everyone's in agreement. Caleb Williams is going to go number 1. I think after the combine, there's a good chance that Jaden Daniels will probably go number 2. But we'll see, right? I'm not a big Drake May guy. It's because of the coach that he plays for. I trust Mac Brown, and I like Mac Brown a lot as a college coach. I don't like Mac Brown as a guy that develops NFL quarterbacks. That's just me, right? And that's it. So Drake May took a little bit of a step back in 2023. His 2022 season was much better. So that's why I'm not 100%, sold on him. But again, he's a guy that could change the game at the combine as well. And there could be someone that we're not talking about that much right now that shines at the combine. Then all of a sudden it's like, man, did you see him? Did you see that arm? Did you see how fast he is? Did you see his accuracy? I mean, there will be. I don't know who it's going to be, but there'll be somebody that will shine at the combine, and it'll be all of a sudden the next greatest thing. And there'll probably be someone who's bad at the combine that will say, hey, you better stay away from him. He didn't do those drills well. He didn't bench press well. He didn't run fast enough. He didn't do yada, yada, yada fast. You know what I mean? Like, it always happens at the combine, and you got to be careful with the combine. I mean, just like you heard Dave Ziegler say in segment number 2, the combine, you should really take those drills that you see them do and use it as confirmation of what you already knew. Or, you know what, let me go back and look at the film to see if I saw this guy really look that fast on the field, on the grass. And if you did, okay, cool. If you didn't, then you say, you know what, that's the Underwear Olympics, so I got to remember that that's the Underwear Olympics. So, Jacob, thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Got time for a couple more as we close out the week really strong. This text is from Ernesto G. in Inglewood, now living in Dallas. He said, look, selling the farm to reach for a quarterback isn't worth the risk. How many top 5 quarterbacks have won a Super Bowl in this modern NFL? How many top 5 quarterbacks have not lived up to the position drafted? If we draft and pick up studs for the O-line, we can get a quarterback drafted at number 13 or trade up in the late first or even the first and the second round. We'll be good. A swing and a miss will set us back too far for AP to have long-term success. We need to go hard in the paint on both sides of the trenches. Your thoughts? That's Ernesto G. in Inglewood, now living in Dallas. And Ernesto, thanks for the text. And look, I say it all the time. Scared money don't make money. Now, I'm not a gambler. I'm scared money. There's the reason I don't make money when it comes to gambling, because that's just not my bag. But at some point, AP is going to be tied to whoever his quarterback is, whether that's Aiden O'Connell, whether that's Russell Wilson, whether that's Justin Fields, or whether that's some other guy that they go and get in the draft. Whoever he decides is going to be his franchise quarterback is who he's going to be tied with. So if he believes that that's Jaden Daniels because he's got that relationship and they go and make the move for him and it doesn't work out, well, at least he tried, right? He tried to go and get that big-time quarterback. Patrick Mahomes has won the Super Bowl 3 times. And I know he wasn't a top 5 quarterback, but he should have been, right? If everybody had known who he was going to be, he'd have been a number 1 overall pick. Now, he was number 10 overall, so it's still top 10. And we see the quarterbacks that are competing with him. Josh Allen, right? Top 10 pick. Joe Burrow, number 1 overall pick, right? He was in the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, I know he was the last pick in the first round, number 31 or 32 overall. I get that. He was the last pick that Baltimore had. They actually traded up into the first round. So he's a first-round quarterback, and he's competing. I said it before, you've got to have a guy that can compete, right? You've got to have a guy that can run with, or at least close to, Patrick Mahomes. I know Jalen Hurts was in the Super Bowl a season ago, before Super Bowl 57, and he was a second-round pick. I get that. But for the most part, man, these guys that are winning the Super Bowls, they're first-round pick quarterbacks, right? I know that Tom Brady obviously was a different dude, and Brock Purdy was just in the Super Bowl, and he was Mr. Irrelevant. I get that. But for the most part, man, like I said, you got to have a guy. You got to have a guy that you really, truly believe in could go and get it done. You can't be afraid of if I make this move, if I invest all this capital, I'm going to fail. Like, you have to trust yourself. That's why you have scouts. That's why you have a team. That's why you hopefully believe in what you're seeing. Okay, this is my guy. And for AP, if it happens to be Jaden Daniels with that relationship he has, I think he has an advantage. Okay, I know this guy personally. I know what he can do. I know what he can bring to the table. And I'm willing to put my career on the line, because that's what you're doing. No matter what you do, if he rocks with Aiden O'Connell the rest of his career, he's hoping that Aiden O'Connell turns into something. He's risking his career there, right? Whoever you put your name on, that's who you're riding with. So whatever direction that they go, that's exactly who he's going to rock with. So it's either going to be he's going to swing for the fences and try to go get some guy that he really believes could take him to the next level, or he's just going to get a guy and think that, you know what, I'll have enough defense, enough run game, and we'll find a way to win games. You're not going to consistently win games against those Kansas City Chiefs with a quarterback that doesn't complete a pass after the first quarter. Yeah, they won on Christmas. That was awesome. I was excited by it. The defense scored 2 touchdowns. That doesn't happen all the time in 7 seconds. The run game showed up, and Aiden O'Connell, he didn't panic. He didn't trip out. He didn't blink when he didn't have a lot of success, but you're not going to be able to do that consistently. So I think Aiden O'Connell's biggest issue, and I've said it for the longest time, is his consistency from the quarterback position. But thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. We'll close out strong with Jordan in Oregon. He's calling to talk about a call from Raider 541 on Thursday's show about potentially trading Davante Adams. Here he is, Jordan in Oregon.
Hey, what's going on, Q? Jordan in Oregon calling in here. Great call, Raider 541. I just wanted to piggyback on that. That's an idea that I've thought about a lot of times for actually a couple of years now. He brought up the idea of trading Davante to the Jets, and the idea of acquiring the overall 10th overall pick. I think that's a hell of an idea, and my reasoning behind it is just go look at the cap hit for next year with Davante and the following year. His 5-year, $140 million contract he signed with the Raiders is backloaded pretty heavy, and he would have a crazy dead cap hit as well if he were ever to have anything happen other than just simply be traded to somebody. And so that's personally where I think this is kind of headed, to be completely honest, Q, is I just don't see a scenario where they're going to be able to keep him beyond at least this year. And so, with the idea that we need a quarterback in this year's draft, if there is a team in the front end that would actually be willing to let us up into that top 3, like a Patriots or really, someone on the very top end, I could see having that 10th overall pick would be huge as well, as far as being able to lure somebody in and trading that pick. So we'd have the 10th as well as the 13th, and I just think it's a hell of an idea. Anyway, man, have a great weekend. Peace out.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And look, I'm not 100% sure that Davante would even get a number 1 right now, right? I mean, the Jets have the number 10 overall pick. I'm not 100% sure that they'd be willing to give that up. I mean, honestly, and you're only worth what someone's willing to trade you for, right? So if they say, yeah, we're not going to give up a number 1, we'll give up a number 2, like Brad Spielberger, who I had on my radio show on Thursday. You heard from him in segment number 1. He actually had a potential trade where it was a 2025 second-round pick for Davante because the Jets don't have a second-round pick in 2024. And I was like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I'm good. I just don't think it makes any sense. The Raiders have already come out and said that they're not interested in trading Davante Adams at all. They got a good thing going with him. They need a trigger man, but I could see the price of doing business. I could see a team saying, especially in the top 3, yeah, we'll come off of it. We'll take that trade capital. But we need to have that quarterback or that wide receiver as well to go with our quarterback. So, again, selfishly, I don't want anything to do with trading Davante. I could see a team asking for him. I just don't know if the Raiders would be willing to pull the trigger on that. So we'll see if they do. But I don't think my gut feeling tells me Davante Adams isn't going anywhere. Now, that could just be my gut feeling being correct. That could be gas. I say it all the time. We'll find out sooner rather than later. But I don't think Davante Adams is on the move at all. I do know that we'll be talking to Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, who Davante Adams is excited about because he worked with him in Green Bay and he knows what he brings to the table. So that's a good thing. And we'll be talking to him around noon this afternoon, 12:10 to be exact. And whatever good stuff we get from that, we'll bring to the show on Monday. So Raider Nation, enjoy your weekend. Get a little R&R, a little rest and relaxation. Of course, we'll continue to go hard in the paint as we attack this offseason like we always do. Until Monday, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.